Let's see, we're just going live, so let me make sure everything's coming through and we're looking good on the live stream. Let's see, I'm gonna end this call and just making sure things are coming through. Let's see, mine says waiting for Proko 3D go live. Okay, here I am, seeing myself. And we are a go. So let's go ahead and get going for day 4 of this sculpture demo series that I'm doing live. If you're interested, you can find the other live streams. They will be up in the Proko 3D YouTube channel. You just go under the section that says live and you can find the past ones. This entire sculpture has been built up during these live streams, and so you're able to see the whole process a little bit more. I won't get to finishing this sculpture 5 to 6 hours. It's just not enough time to finish a sculpture this size. Maybe if I was faster, maybe if I was more focused, I might be able to get farther. But hopefully, most of the this part's important because most of the mistakes that beginners make happen within the first 5 or 6 hours of making the sculpture. Most of it's structural issues, measurements, the size of proportions, things like that. And a lot of that can be established within the first few hours. So shout out to our sponsors. I actually, just before this, I used DaVinci Eye app. The DaVinci Eye app, which is one of our sponsors. You can find links for all of the sponsors in the description. I use that to overlay the image of the sculpture with the reference images. Those are provided by posespace.com. Big thank you to them. If you want to download the images that I'm using for this sculpture, and there's also a mail pose that you can use, those will be available during the competition and afterwards. And so you can go to the link. There should be a link in the description. If not, I'll comment, and there will be a link in the comments. And I gave a comment that has that link. So if you need to download those images, you can just go to my comment. If you're watching live, if you're watching afterwards, I'll put that same link so that you guys can get those free references. These ones are censored. The uncensored versions are on postspace.com, so you can be aware of that. Thank you to Proko.com for sponsoring and helping us host this sculpture challenge. Thank you to Blick Art Materials for donating some gift cards that will be part of the prizes, and those are the sponsors for the competition. So as I overlaid that, I saw that there were some areas that I wanted to adjust. So there were just some things that still needed to be worked on a little bit. So now I'm just going to come in with a tool or other things and make some of those adjustments. Let's see. And as I'm doing that, I'm trying to establish the structure and then have more of the anatomy in mind as I'm going through and making some of these changes. There was something like here on the arm, I noticed that the transition, this point of the armpit is a little bit high, so I need to move that down. So to do that, I'm gonna add some clay to this side to kind of change that transition, that inside point. And then I also noticed that the rib cage didn't feel like it had enough mass up here, that it came out a little bit farther. So I'm going to add some more mass to that rib cage over here, because there is some negative space between those forms. So I'm just coming with pieces of clay and building that up. When I use the DaVinci Eye app and overlay the images, I'm not worried about it being, I'm not trying to get like a 3D scan of the sculpture. I just want to use it as information and then decide, like, based on this information, do I want to, make these adjustments, or am I okay with the way it is? Like, for example, like this foot is turned a little bit more in the in the reference, it's like more, comes more to this side, but maybe I like it with the foot coming up a little bit more vertical, or maybe I do want to move it over so that it matches the reference image a little bit better. So those are the choices that you can make. And again, if you're going to err, I suggest that people err on the side of making things more interesting, more movement. Try not to err so much that the proportions start to look off, because that'll lose you points as I'm judging the sculptures. If it looks like the proportions or the anatomy is not accurate, then those will lose. It's just distracting from the design with those things, so you just don't want to have any of those distractions. Here I felt like the trapezius muscle is a little bit high, so I'm just going to come press that down a little bit. And then the shoulder, same thing. Press it down a little bit. And just taking little pieces of clay and making those adjustments. That's already, I think, looking a little bit better. Let's go ahead and come to this side. So yeah, the rib cage was a little bit too small from the front view. So that's feeling better with those adjustments made. I also felt like this was a little bit far out, so I'm just going to take a knife and then roll it across the form of the leg. So the mass of the leg is coming this way. Then I want to take the knife and roll it over that cylinder, and this helps me to find that form. And it's a little bit easier to do that than coming along the length of the cylinder. And that was a tip by a professional sculptor when I was in a sculpting competition, a couple years back. And I asked him, like, do you have any suggestions? And he's like, when you're solidifying the forms, and he used the example of the leg, he said, come across the form with your tool, with your knife or whatever it is, a spatula, and that will help you find the form better than if you come along the length of the form. So keep that in mind as you're working with your whatever tools you're using, whatever let's see, whatever form that you're designing. Pay attention to the direction that you're building that form up in, because that can make quite a bit of difference. So usually as I lay in, like for example, now I'm doing some of the arm, as I lay in the clay, I'll usually lay it in the direction of the form, the direction of the muscle or the arm. And then when I work it with tools, that's when I'll come against the direction, so that you have, and you can do that from several, like you can come more in a way that's coming across the form down, and then you can do the same thing coming up. And this is similar to the masters of the past. If you look at stone sculptures of the past, they would take their chisel, the tooth chisel, and they would come across the form several times in one direction and then come across the forms in other directions. And you can see that on unfinished sculptures. And they were able to really hone in those forms using that technique. And so that's kind of the technique that I recommend that people try to use as they're sculpting with tools. See, I'm just going to give an indication of the belly button, where that is. That's just a kind of a clue or a landmark for what's happening. Same thing with this leg. I'm pulling some of the mass over just to make things look a little bit better. And then I feel like the leg itself maybe comes just a little bit higher. So I'm just going to add some some clay to that. And then before I do that, let's go to the side view. I did this same thing from the side, so I'm just gonna pause that. Again, using the DaVinci Eye app and looking at it from the side. Let me pause there. And then I can just see from the side what else could be adjusted to make it more similar to the sculpture. One of the first things, I feel like the belly is a little bit coming out a little bit much. So I'm just going to take a knife and cut away some of that excess clay. Right there. And then same thing with the front view. I feel like the rib cage, there wasn't enough mass on the rib cage, so I'm just going to come in with some clay and lay it over on top of the rib cage. This means I'll need to redo some of the work that I've already done, but we really want to have a fairly accurate rib cage. So we're sculpting. And then this arm, I feel like maybe comes back a little bit farther. And I think I do like it coming back a little bit farther. That looks better. I'm going to add that, some more clay to the arm. And another thing is that there just needs to be a little bit more mass all over the sculpture. You know, it's still thin, which is what we want, but now that it's getting towards the end of these, I wanted to see how far I could get on these 6 hours. You know, that means that I need to start getting closer to the final amounts of mass for the sculpture. Okay. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit smoother of a transition here in the back than what I have, so I can come in with some clay and smooth out that transition in the back. All right, that's looking quite a bit better. Let's see, if you're watching live and you have questions, let me go to some of those, and we'll see if how we're doing. Somebody says, "Hey there, thank you so much for these videos. It's really awesome getting a step-by-step process of the sculpting for the competition." Hey, you guys are welcome. I'm glad to do it. It's fun. I enjoy this type of stuff. This has made me think, oh, I should do more live streams. So maybe I will. Maybe on my own channel, I'll try to do some more live streams coming up. So if you're not subscribed, it's the Andrew Joseph Keith YouTube channel. That's my personal channel, and there I do sculpting stuff. But I also have other things that I'm interested in. This channel is just sculpting. So just be aware that on my personal channel, sometimes I just have random videos about other things I'm interested in. So somebody's saying, how do you know that not somebody sent you photos from a 3D print for the competition? Let's see. I guess you could do a like with AI now, you could probably take the images, and I'm not suggesting anybody do this, but you could probably take the images of the reference and then ask AI to translate it into a sculpture looking thing, like combine the two. That you probably could do that with where AI is at right now. And how would I know? I guess it might almost be impossible. So it's the honor system. Be honorable. Don't do that. Don't cheat. It's a figure sculpting competition. Use clay. I've already said this isn't for like 3D or anything like that. But that's a good question. I don't know if I would at this point. You know, a lot of art you actually can't tell, especially when you're just looking at photos. Obviously, if it was a competition in person, then you can just see that it's in clay, and so that's much easier to, much more difficult to fake. But you know, don't fake it. And even I think even if you were to take a 3D scan of the model and then transfer it into clay exactly, I don't think that's as interesting as a well done sculpture, a well designed sculpture that chooses the parts that you want to emphasize and then the parts that you want to allow to kind of fade into the background. Though that's what I'm looking for is I'm hoping a well designed sculpture, not an exact 3D copy of the references. Let's see. Does a sculpture have the same texture as oil-based clay? Or does Sculpey have the same texture as oil-based clay? It's a little bit different. It's just a different material. The texture is a little bit different. I prefer oil-based clay, but it doesn't have that advantage of that you can just bake it in an oven. So when I have most of my commission sculptures, when somebody says, "Can you do a sculpture for me?" those I do typically in polymer clay because then I don't have to cast it, and so I'm okay with it being a little bit different of a texture. But just grab some and try it out. It's not too expensive. It is more expensive, but it's not generally too expensive if you just get a little bit just to try out. Somebody says, "Hello, thank you for your efforts in these live streams. In addition to yourself, who will be judging the submissions? Will all the submissions be made public or only the winners? Thank you." So the submissions over at the Proko 3D or over at the Proko page, which I put a link to that, those will be available for everybody in the Proko community and anybody that goes to the page to see this competition because it's just in the comments of it. So everybody will be able to see all of the submissions. As far as if anybody else will assist in the judging, I haven't asked anybody yet. I just assumed I was going to do it. But so I don't know. It might just be me, but we'll see if I have there are many artists that I take their input very seriously, so I might ask some other people to help with this with the judging, but as far as I know, it's just going to be me at this point. Somebody says that's great advice. Thank you. Well, hopefully it was. I don't know which specific advice, but I'm glad to hear that it was great. Just look at how many fingers it has. As far as the sculpture, yeah, there's no fingers yet, but maybe we'll get to the hands and face in just a little bit. What oil-based clay do you recommend? I really like Chavant NSP clay, NSP medium, and I actually take the medium and I melt it down and mix a little bit of hard clay in, just because I prefer a firmer clay. But it also depends on the size that you're going for. But as far as the clay I use, that's the clay I really like. But I've also heard great things about like monster clay, but I haven't used that much. So I would just grab some different types of small amounts of different types of clay and see what you like. Yeah, so I think that catches me up with some of the questions. So let's go ahead and go back to just the reference images, and let's do that. Let's go ahead and work on the head and the hands just a little bit more so we can get a better sense of what's going on in these areas. So let's go ahead and try to establish the shape of the head a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and add some clay for the jaw. Let's add some for the cheekbone, which is about halfway. It's just under the eye socket, like at the bottom of the eye socket is where the cheekbone is. And let's add that on both sides. Something like that. That's already looking a little bit better when it comes to the structure of the head. And let's switch to the side view so I can see the profile of the face. And I'm just going to go ahead and lay in as best I can. See, the forehead comes down a little bit more than I have. Then there's the The nose, a very soft transition, small nose. And the transition to the mound of the mouth. So this is I break down this process more in the portrait sculpting course, but this is basically the process I recommend is first the head, the general shape of the head as a block in, so very simplified block in. And actually for this part, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. So, hopefully, can you guys see that a little bit better? So first is the block in, then I'm gonna work on the profile. So let's continue to work on the profile. You guys can't see the profile that well as I'm doing it. Well, maybe I'll move just a little bit so you guys can see something. And so the profile next. Sometimes this, sometimes this goes quickly. Usually it doesn't. Usually it takes a little bit to develop. But I wouldn't worry about getting an exact likeness. This competition is figure sculpting competition. The head is an important part, so I'd have it, I want to see that you developed the head and that the features of the head are in place. They can be a little bit simplified, but I want to make sure that the structure of the head feels right, that the location of the features feels right, and that's a really important thing when I'm that's one of the things that I'll be looking for as far as the judging criteria. So here you can see that profile starting to take shape a little bit more. I'm just building out the outline of the head from the side. Let's see, just some other comments. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Really enjoying what I've seen with these live streams. Just wondering, is it possible to watch all the previous ones, part 1, 2, 3, etc. somehow? Yes, absolutely. You can find those on the live section on the Proko 3D YouTube channel. So it's not in the videos section, it's in the live section, and all of these will be available. And yeah, you can consider it its own little mini course, a 6-hour mini course that you can just follow along with, that will show you my method for building out a sculpture. And if you're interested in getting the full course, the premium course, then obviously I appreciate everybody that gets that over at Proko.com. It really means a lot to me. The people that purchase that, it's an incentive that says do more of this. Whenever a student purchases the course, it's like you're sending the message, do more of this. And that allows me to make more videos, more free content, and more premium content, more courses and things like that. So I really appreciate it. Let's see. There's kind of a separation for the lips. I'm just gonna take a little bit of clay and add it. And the chin is a little bit something like that. I'm trying to get the silhouette, looking somewhat good, somewhat attractive as far as the sculpture goes. So we want that. We don't want the head to be distracting. Let me go ahead and thin out the nose a little bit. So that's what the profile is looking like at this point. Somebody's saying monster clay is like taffy, very good for some things, but also very different than Roma clay. Yeah, I've only touched a little bit of it, and it is quite different than other types of clay. It just doesn't feel the same. So It's just, but yeah, but I know a lot of people that like it because it doesn't stick to tools as much. It's not as sticky as some oil-based clays. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to just fill in the cheeks a little bit with some clay. Also the mound of the mouth right here, the dental mound or the tooth cylinder, sometimes that's referred to. That's what that's referred to. Same thing on the other side. Come in with pieces of clay and fill things in. So you can see I'm just, I'm taking it one step at a time, one angle at a time. Let me fill in the forehead over here. So with complicated areas, the face is really complicated. Just get that profile first. And I didn't get it's not a perfect profile. It's not an exact likeness, but it's something. And then I can build the rest of the features off of that profile. Let's go ahead and add in an indication of where the ears are. Just a little piece of clay, kind of the shape of a apple or an orange, something like that. Or a slice of apple or a section of orange. That's kind of the shape we're going for. And just tiny pieces of clay to continue to build out the forms. Same thing on the other side, trying to match the development of the sides. Like if you develop one side a little bit too much, which is kind of what I'm doing, I'm focusing mostly on the side that's a little bit easier to get to. If you focus too much, then you just have to go catch up on the other side. Let me turn to the front view and get the ears. So I'm just gonna try to copy the shape of the head from the front view. She has ears that kind of taper towards the bottom a little bit more than what I had. I'm just gonna push that back. I mean, these are great references, great model. Both the male and the female poses for this competition. I really enjoy these. Hopefully you guys enjoy these poses. I think they're great for figure sculptors. And if you can, after this, if this competition or any other time, if you can get access to go to a live sculpting session or a live modeling session, that is very beneficial, and I definitely recommend that. It's really fun to work with a live model. It's different than working from photos, and I think it's better in many ways. Photos, they're easier, they're cheaper to get and easier to get access to, so they do have their benefits, but sculpting from a live model can be really helpful. There's just more visual information that it's hard to get from photos. Let's go ahead and redraw that center line coming in. Let me see. So somebody's saying that oil-based clay, the oil-based clay I use is sticky. It's J-Mac, Freeman, or Van Aken, and my tools become sticky with clay. How do I deal with this? Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I really like the Chavant clay is it's not that sticky, especially the firm, the medium, and the hard. The hard is almost like wax, like the hard Chavant clay, and I mix a little bit of that hard in with the the medium. But as far as like what you can use, I don't even know what you could put on your tools that would keep it from sticking. I also used some microcrystalline wax recently, and that's really fun to sculpt, but you have to sculpt it by hand because it is so sticky. It's really sticky when it comes to metal, but it sticks great to metal like this wire armature that I'm using. So it's great for like gesture studies, like smaller gesture studies. But if you're trying to work and get a sculpture finished with tools and things like that, then it's a very tricky clay to use just because it is so sticky. Let me come and I'm gonna. So I keep thinking, oh, I'm gonna move over to the hands, but then I keep seeing, areas of the body, the figure that are bothering me. So I just go to those. But you can see how quickly the head can start to come into shape if you just treat it simply, just get that profile first and then turn to the front view, lay in some of the anatomy first, the structure around the eye sockets, the cheekbones, and the mound of the mouth. And if you're able to lay in those features in a way that's accurate, then even without all the details, it starts to look much, much better than just little tiny pieces of clay. Then let's add some more. The neck is a little bit thicker than what we have, so we can add some thickness to the neck. And we got that the sternocleidomastoid muscle. That's really important feature. Goes from behind the ear on the mastoid process of the skull. That's a little bump that you can feel just behind your ear. If you feel behind your ear, there's a little bump, and then that goes down to the clavicle down here. So we want to make sure we get that accurately in place. There's a little notch at the neck we can lay in. And you'll notice I'm not using any tools at this point. It's mostly just my hands. Probably for the first, I probably won't go to tools. Maybe I will tomorrow, the last day. Somebody's saying I use turpentine to clean the Chavant from the tools. That's a good idea. Though I haven't used it, so. And then somebody saying, thanks, you're a Chavant savant. That's good. Good one. Okay, let me come back to this. Let's go ahead, since we developed the head a little bit, I'll work a little bit on the hands just because the hands are difficult, and some people might like to see how I would approach sculpting the hand on this armature. So I'm just going to move that up a little bit so you can see. Actually going to even scoot it a little bit more close. Let me refocus you guys can see. Okay. So with the hands, it's just like with the rest of the figure, I'm gonna actually press the armature a little bit into the clay of the forehead, just so things aren't moving around too much. And then I'm going to, I have the reference image zoomed in a little bit more. So I'm looking at the reference images, though you guys can't see it right now. And I want to get that hand from the front view. So I'm going to get the forearm established a little bit better. Lay in some clay, and round it off, just so that I have more of an idea of the size, shape, and those forms of the forearm, because that really helps when you're trying to establish the arm. I want to make sure I get that in place. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and come in with some clay to cover up this loop. So with this loop, and if you watch the video that goes over my method, my favorite method for building wire armatures, this loop represents the palm of the hand. It doesn't represent the fingers. So the loop is the palm of the hand. Let me move this just a little bit more up. Get that centered a little bit more. So I'm just going to cover that palm of the hand with a piece of clay. Same thing with the back side, just kind of sandwich a piece of clay in place. And there we have the palm of the hand right there. It's kind of a concave shape. I'm going to just press in a little bit. So that's what that is looking like. Then there's some fat pads. So there's a fat pad on the pinky side, a little fat pad. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And then there's the thenar eminence, which is the larger fat pad right here where the thumb is. Go ahead and add that in. Then I'm going to make these a little bit larger because I feel like that palm of the hand is a little bit too small. And the thenar eminence, or the thumb itself, starts at the wrist. So that's something that is sometimes hard to realize, or we don't realize until we do, that the thumb starts at the wrist, whereas the other fingers continue up the palm. I mean, they also start at the wrist, but there's an extra bone in the other digits. So the thumb comes this way. Let's get that thenar eminence in place. And then there's going to be a little fat pad at the end of the palm of the hand. And I'm just going to take a little piece of clay to represent the thumb. It's going to be coming in right here. Right like that. See, I'm looking at the questions again, make sure I didn't miss any. Somebody's saying my sculpture's arms look long even though it is the right measurements. So that might be that the sculpture is just too thin, like the arms are too thin. That can make it look too long. But it could also be, you know, if something looks off, then it is. So just like double check. If you have the DaVinci app, that's really helpful just to double check the proportions. But it might be the thickness. Somebody's saying for a 45 centimeter sculpture, which wire thickness do you recommend? For that, I like, this is 8-gauge aluminum wire. It's recycled aluminum wire. Works really well. That the same person about the arms. My sculpture's arms look long, even though it's the right measurement, only up to a thin layer of clay over the wire. Yeah, so it's probably just that it needs to be thickened out. So just keep going and it should start to look better. Somebody's saying the forms are looking good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and keep going with this. So we got somewhat of an indication of the thumb coming off. And I'm actually just going to add just like a wedge of clay for the fingers, and then we'll build on top of that. So let's just do that. I'm going to look from some different angles. So now I'm going to look from this back angle. You can see that, to see kind of the general shape that the fingers are making. And you can see that there's some separation between the fingers, but I'm just going to try to put in a piece of clay that's about that shape. So just coming in, making sure that it's firmly attached, and then just kind of squishing it out to and lengthening it to be an indication of those fingers. So basically it's just like right at this point, it's just like an oven mitt. So you can think of it that way, simplifying it into an oven mitt type of form. Let me make sure with a tool, I'm just going to make sure that this connects. Man, what happened? Do you see the bend in this tool? This is my favorite tool, and I must have stepped on it or something. I don't know what I could have done that bent it like that. Maybe I'll have to get another one. Okay, so let's see. Feel like the pinky needs to come out a little bit more. And then once we have this in place, we can take little pieces of clay and build it on top of those forms. This kind of curves a little bit more. I think the pinky is the one that's curving the most. So I want to have that. And I can take little pieces of clay and put them onto the fingers, little coils. And then I like to just press on either side of where I think the knuckles should be, to just say like this is what's happening, this knuckle. Let me see if you can see it with let's do the middle finger. So I take a little coil of clay and put it in place for that middle finger, and then I just kind of scoop away from where the knuckle should be. I could push it around a little bit. And that just gives me an indication of that high point. Let's do the same thing. Same thing on this other finger, the ring finger. And same thing with the pinky. And they may get, squished a little bit or something like that as I'm making adjustments. Let me see if there's some other questions. Do you know of a supplier for square aluminum armature wire in North America? Toronto in London, England sells it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, because most of the wire I've got has just been like on eBay, through eBay. And so you might search there, but I don't remember ever seeing any square wire for armatures. There is Sculpture House that might have it. That's like a website that I've seen that sometimes has sculpture related materials. But yeah, I'm not I'm not sure where that might be. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, square wire, that can be helpful. Then I'm going to come with the next knuckle, which is about half the way between that first knuckle and the tips of the fingers is the second knuckle. So you divide the hand in half, and from here to here is about the same as the distance from here to here. Oh man. From here to here is about the same from there to there, and then half of this is right there. And then half, or a little bit farther than half, is, the last knuckle. Somebody's asking, do you think that using a firmer clay for fine details of the fingers is a good idea? Yeah, it does make it easier, but if like this sculpture, this sculpture, I'm just sorry, I had some technical issue. With this sculpture, just because the whole thing I wanted to do fairly quickly, soft clay is good for that. But if you're doing like miniatures or smaller details, it does help to have a firmer clay. That's why I really like Chavant medium mixed with a little bit of hard, because I can warm it up during the beginning stages, and then at the end I can let it cool down, and it becomes pretty firm for these types of details. Whereas right now, as I'm doing it, things get messed up pretty fast. And then I want to get the basic, shape of the hand. It's kind of rounding off this way, and then there's some, there's space in between the fingers. That maybe I'll exaggerate just with the tool, just pressing those apart to say that there's a separation between these. And then the tips of the fingers, I'm just going to come in and try to give more of an indication of those. I feel like my my issue with sculpting the hands is I almost always sculpt the hands too big, and you can see that I'm already making that same mistake again. These hands are feeling, they're quickly becoming too large. So that means I need to make adjustments. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and take off this right here, and maybe move this. Just say that the palm comes down a little bit farther. So I'm just looking at the size of the hands compared to the face, and this hand is just way too big. So we just gotta make that adjustment. Let's see, that feels a little bit better when it comes to the size, but now I have to fix the fingers. So having a tool does help in some of these, just making sure that you're placing things in the right area. So I'm just going to come down and say that these fingers are coming down a little bit farther. And you can see that it's much harder to fix things, or to make it look good by removing clay with the tool. Like as I go in and change those fingers, I just don't like it as much as how it was looking when I used clay to build out those forms. But I need to fix things. You can't leave it. Can't leave the hands that large. I'm going to come in here and remove some more. Okay, let me check the comments as I'm doing this. Have you ever sculpted stone or like marble? Something that you have to subtract from the mass to bring out the figure. Yeah, I have sculpted stone, so that's what I studied in the university was abstract stone sculpture. So I abstracted the figure, made it more stylized and simple, and so I do have experience with sculpting the figure in stone. It's a different process, and if I do it again, I'd like to do it more realistic, or I'd like to get into doing it more realistic. But it is a challenge. That you're talking about subtractive sculpture, where you're removing material to get the forms. Whereas this, if you make a mistake, you can add things back, you can take things away, just like I did it with the hand. But in stone, it's much more difficult because you can only take away. So when you make mistakes, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller of a sculpture. So you have to sculpt fat. With this sculpture, I recommend sculpting thin and slowly building up the forms, but sculpting thin. With stone sculpting, you have to sculpt fat and then slowly push your way to the surface. Somebody's asking, is there wire at the beginning of the fingers? No, there's just a loop in the palm. If you watch the beginning of the live stream, there was just a loop in the palm, but there's no clay inside of the fingers right now. Usually for smaller sculptures, I just find that wire generally mostly gets in the way, so I don't. I try not to use wire if it's a sculpture that's this size or smaller. Okay, so let me take a little bit of a break from that hand, and let's back up, and I'm just gonna start working all over the sculpture again. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what when you start to work in the details, what how you slow down and things like that. But let me back up a little bit. And this way you can see the whole figure, and I'll continue working on it from all over. What's a traditional sculptural method for checking your accuracy not using the DaVinci Eye app? That's a great question. So in the past, especially when you're sculpting from a live model, what you're able to do is you're able to have the model standing on the floor or pedestal or something, and then you can just look right. You can close one eye and you can look right through your sculpture at the model, and because your sculpture is smaller, you're able to basically transfer the outline of the sculpture onto the model, and you can do the exact same thing of checking yourself. But to do that, you have to have a live model, and it's called from direct observation or something like that. And that is the way that they would use in the past to check themselves, is just closing one eye. The model's on the other side, they're larger, the sculpture is smaller, and then you can just line it up just like you would as you're doing with the DaVinci Eye app. There's some other methods, they would, or a lot of the times they might measure more. They might use a lot more measurements to check things. So, some other, like some measurement transfer systems, they would use like point machines. Those were especially useful for transferring a sculpture in clay into stone. So you already have the sculpture done, and then they were able to use machines that could scale up the sculpture. So you could have a sculpture this size, but then do it life size using a point machine that's based on it's a long pole, and then it has like a triangle shape. I saw a video on it. It was pretty cool. But anyway, you're able to transfer the measurements and the location in space onto a larger sculpture. And it's just really ingenious, the methods that they had in the past to transfer the information onto their sculptures. It's really cool because it kind of combines like engineering and design and like building things with sculpture, and that's what artists of the past did a lot of the times. And then they also had machines that you could use while drawing, where there's like a mirror on one eye that's at an angle, and then you could basically overlay your vision of the two things. The mirror would be over one eye, and then you could do that for drawing. You could have the mirror reflect what you're looking at, what you're drawing, and then draw it down on the table. That's like a similar principle. But yeah, there's been many ingenious things that have been done over the centuries to be able to more accurately see the information that you're trying to observe from the model. So yeah, let's come back to working kind of all around the figure for a little bit. So now that the head is somewhat established, let's see, we're at 157. So I guess, yeah, let's just go. We'll just have this live stream be an hour. So I'm just going to call that going to end at the hour mark. So I think we started like a minute after, so we'll just go to like a minute after the hour, or we started a minute late. And yeah, I hope you guys see that whatever you're doing, you just break it down into smaller tasks, like with the hand. Start simple, then slowly add complexity as you're working. Check out our sponsors. I really appreciate them. All of the courses over at Proko.com. I especially appreciate those that get the figure sculpting course. That I really do appreciate the students over there, and it's done pretty well, and so I'm very grateful for everybody that signed up. And the DaVinci app is a great resource. Posespace.com is a great resource for sculptors. Blick art materials for some sculpting materials they'll have, and other art materials. So I hope you'll check those sponsors out. Let me see what else needs to be done in the last like 2 minutes that we have. Just looking around. Yeah, I'm excited. So I'll have to, after these live streams, maybe a couple times next week, maybe I'll continue the live streams, but just on my YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed to the Andrew Joseph Keith YouTube channel, you can go subscribe over there. And I'll try to keep some of this going. Next week's going to be busy for me, so I might only be able to do one live stream. But yeah, this has been fun, and hopefully it's been insightful for you guys, because it's been really fun for me. I love competitions and these challenges. Hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more of them. Okay, I'm looking all over, just looking for things that look wrong or out of place, and then trying to add pieces of clay to build out those forms a little bit more. I think time's almost up. Get every minute counting. Let me see. Before. Do you recommend using calibers with a 2D reference? I haven't done that, so I can't recommend either way. Let me just answer these questions really quick. Do you regret destroying some figures just because you didn't have enough clay at the moment to finish the project that you were working on? Yeah, that does hurt sometimes, especially, you know, you don't want to take the time to make a mold, but you need the clay. So I usually, if there's something I like, I try to just buy more clay, because especially with this clay, it's not too expensive. Somebody says, are you familiar with using the envelope drawing to check your negative shapes and create by connecting the major body landmarks for accuracy? Yeah, that's a great method. So looking at negative space, things like that, great and very helpful, especially as you're sculpting the figure. Looking at the negative areas, that's really useful. All right, we'll see you guys in the next one. Stay creative, stay productive. See you tomorrow. And good luck with your submissions for the competition.